Vibes Drop In, episode 2, Shaun Burns, Save the Waves. Here we are, dude.
Here we are.
Because we don't know, this is going into the magical ether of the universe. Just give a quick little background, who you are, how you kind of came to this little spot right here.
Yeah. Shaun Burns, born and raised in Santa Cruz, 32 years old. Growing up in Santa Cruz as a surfer my whole life, being in the ocean, around the ocean, doing your lifeguards. Growing up on the west side of Santa Cruz, boogie boarding at Its Beach and Fingerville, Steamer Lane, and went off to college at Cal Poly, came home, traveled the world competing on the WSL and doing surf contests as a professional surfer for O'Neill Wetsuits and a few other sponsors. And I fell in love with the ocean from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I think when I, saw other places around the world that were kind of struggling, kind of conservation and with their waves and ocean, I interned with Save the Waves and had a really good time interning with them. It was a good group of people, and they just have a platform to help out other, communities around the world that I want to be a part of.
Yeah. I think we talked about it before. I think we were just talking before we turned the camera on that, Vibes is 2 years old. You guys have been in since the first issue. We had a conversation, I think even pre-first issue, about your guys' space here, but the bigger conversation about the small things all of us can do to make a difference. And I think our contribution was going to be this little print thing we do 4 times a year. This was already, the institution that it was. And I think, this mission, when you look at the simple mission of Save the Waves, it really is about engaging people, I think in a weird way, to create empathy for these ecosystems. Because I think that path, Nellie and I, we've got all the same friends, but we always talk about this phrase, which is like engagement is the fastest path to empathy. And like means
Yeah.
engagement, like you get eyes on it, you get engagement with people. And then so you kind of do all right, so what now with that empathy? Well, the empathy theoretically is that you care about your coastline, you care about, particularly in this one, I want you to talk about that, because the one thing that I've learned in 2 years working with you guys, when I bring up Save the Waves, they're like, wait, these dudes are going around protecting waves? And it seems like it narrows down the conversation. I already sort of know the answer to this. Like, this is that one we talked about earlier, that lost marketing leader for a bigger agenda.
Mhm.
I think saving a wave in an ecosystem is just the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I think I love what you said about engagement and like getting people engaged and activating your community.
Yeah.
And especially here in Santa Cruz, where there's so many surfers, coastal goers, surf companies, nonprofits, environmental nonprofits.
Yeah.
You get people just through surfing and being in the ocean,
Yeah.
and you engage with that ocean. You see how awesome it is here.
Exactly.
All the wildlife, how awesome the beaches are,
Yeah.
all the different seasons, big waves, small waves, beginners, pro surfers. You find that love for the ocean, and then through conservation, you kind of get people to, hey, what can I do to look after those
Yep.
waves? And, kind of that gateway drug is kind of that beach cleanup. Everyone used to have a beach cleanup.
Totally.
You kind of see all the cigarette butts and all the trash. And then so you can kind of come to Save the Waves and other conservation groups to say, hey, what more can I do to work with maybe some policy management or some more engagement to look after my surf spots? And so I think Santa Cruz here is like a really good hub to look after
Totally.
your surf spots.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing here at Save the Waves is we're using Santa Cruz as kind of our laboratory. We're taking things, working with the surfers, working with the city, the county, coastal commission, all the kind of key players that are working on the coastline.
Yeah.
And we're realizing, what's working with, those players, what's not working in a sense of like, how do you activate the community?
Yeah.
And then we're taking that approach to international communities around the world.
Because I think what you're saying is like the thing that it resonates, and this could be a magazine, this could be Save the Waves, but the kind of like almost a beta test of all the things, like it's a stress test of like, because politics are going to be the same in any city. Whenever you present this, I got to imagine the resistance, just like the first story. I was kind of doing a little bit of homework going all the way back to the beginning. It all started on a beach with a harbor. Is that kind of I'm not simplifying it, but it was sort of along lines of, with Will, right? Was it in one man's journey on a wave that he was surfing? They're dumping shit into the ocean. He's talking to some kids on the beach or whatever. And he's like, what's happening?
Yeah.
That they're building a harbor, this wave's gone.
Yeah.
Was that sort of the beginning of Save the Waves?
Yeah. In Jardin des Mars, was
And
the
yep.
wave.
Okay.
And so yeah, it was one of his favorite waves that he's ever been to. Government was putting in a harbor there, pretty much going to destroy the wave.
Yeah.
And he said, "What's going on?" Just like you said, and he raised, locals to get engaged and say, "Hey, you guys love this wave. Just take a stand and try and save this wave." And
Right.
so here we are 21 years later, Save the Wave's still going towards, coastal conservation and surf ecosystem protection.
It's amazing. It's amazing, and I think that story also, if I'm remember, maybe this was in some of the first articles, but the homeworks, it's in the back of my head, but also I think there's a lesson in there is like the overwhelming nature of a problem, right? So the overwhelming nature of a problem is I'm stoked on this wave. This is our little spot. It's going away. And having kind of the balls to kind of step through and make a call. And then that call leads to a relationship, I think with Patagonia or something like that, whatever it was. And but it's one guy kind of pushing through that uncomfortable nature of like, I don't know this person. I want to make a difference. And then that kind of scales out to now you're talking newsletters, engagements like this, engagements that you do all over the place. Is a lot of people look at the planet, they look at, right now in our circumstance with global warming, with everything that we're going through, and then the human incursion on these coasts, it's overwhelming. It's too much. What can I do? If I do click that newsletter, it seems like what can one little person do in this big argument?
It's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Everyone kind of
Yeah.
asks themselves that. And so, yeah, Will Henry, when he thought of that, he was just that one person, but when they protected that wave, it wasn't just him that was there, it was that whole community. And Save the Wave has always been about like building that coalition. So it's like, my job in a nutshell is just building
I love
relationships.
it.
And so you build the coalition, and expressly from a grassroots approach. It's not just people, we're not just flying to a community and saying, "Hey, you got to protect this place." It's flying there or listening to them first. You got to
Mm,
open your ears first before you open your mouth. You listen to them. Do you guys have an issue here? Do you have a problem here? Do you want to protect something? And then you work with the local community. So, yeah, Will was maybe that first person that raised that voice, but it was all the locals that got together that really protected and saved
that
that wave.
that's
So,
so rad. I think of this. My wife works for Sutter, and she kind of has a team. And one of the things she always talks about, as far as management and kind of hearing, is active listening. Active listening is what you just talked about, where it's like before you go in and hear yourself talk, you might just want to listen for a little bit because a lot of the answers are going to come in listening. And the thing about that does is it gets back to that word again. If you're actively listening, like we're kind of doing now, you're engaging them. And so when you get to your agenda, that you feel more so like you're not landing on them so much as you're partnering with them on their coastline.
mhm.
But do you meet, I guess getting back to the beginning of the question, what you're kind of testing here in Santa Cruz, the stress limits, do you meet sort of resistance um, politically? And I guess countries are different too, but is there, it feels like, even we'll get to it pretty soon with your conversation with Panetta, but there's resistance here,
Mhm.
you know, is that a common theme that you kind of get a first knee jerk reaction of resistance?
Yeah, I mean, working with surfers is always, pretty tricky and funny. Yeah, they're some of the saltiest people in the world, them and fishermen maybe,
So,
but so so, yeah, I mean, uh, you know, just with the changes going on, not everyone's gonna get what they want, and
yeah,
we're trying to find, peace and trying to find a way for everyone to find common ground.
totally.
But with, how many changes there are, just with the eroding coastline here in Santa Cruz, obviously, 100, 200 years down the line, it's going to keep eroding. And are we just going to keep kicking the can down the road, or are we going to kind of take a stand and figure out what to do? So we've been trying to, work with the community on what that approach is. And
Yeah.
it's hard, but the city's been looking towards surfers and understanding that they're the ones in the water and they're the ones that are seeing the changes firsthand. And so they want to hear from those surfers and they want to hear from the people that are, you know, yeah, just seeing it firsthand and they want to hear their input a little bit more. So yeah, it's really tricky, but it's something that I feel good doing because I feel like it's, for my son and everyone's future, it's we got to start looking after it.
That's it. And then another buddy of ours, we mentioned him already, is Ethan. We've been working on some stuff with Nelly. And at one point, we were doing some B roll stuff and we shut down the cameras. Ethan had done his thing. He talked about it. And we came back and turned it back on, and I asked him a question in the documentary kind of world of like, is it too late for all of this? And he answered very honestly. He said, yes, but he talked about his kids there's a mitigation and still a proactive nature to, yes, from the standpoint of what we've done to this planet and where we're at.
Mm.
There you can't rewind some things. There's some statistics where you can get coral reefs back, and there's a lot of progressive things going. But our obligation, I think, from what he's talking about, is to be these champions of like this progressive like activism as far as maintaining what we've got and still getting some wins where you can't, where we haven't kind of hit the tipping point. And so that resonates with me. The other one I can't get out of my head right now is you're talking about. I'm just wondering the salty fishermen and surfers. And I'm thinking of Matt Rockhold. I'm like,
Yeah.
because they're deadliest catch, and he's got that might be
Latest catch.
the friendliest cat. Sorry, that's his friendliest cat, but that's the saltiest of the salty. And then so kind of bringing it forward a little bit, like now we're kind of like that's sort of the background of it. Because I know this is one I want to get in this kind of short right now is like bringing it all the way. We're in March 2025. Things are shifty. Things are getting a little weird. And you even had a meeting a couple days ago with Jimmy Panetta.
Mhm.
And how did that go? And then can you give kind of like a sort of a save the waves kind of like press release on the current world we're living in right now with the changing in the politics?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak for Save the Waves. It's
I
in
understand.
the politics, but my meeting today actually is with Jimmy Panetta. Right now, or at 4
Oh, right on.
today.
Okay, yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's like an example. Jimmy Panetta reached out to the Santa Cruz Longboard Union, and I got a lucky invite to be a member to attend that meeting with them.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the example of like how government officials are seeking advice from
I love it.
the stewards of the coastline, which,
Yeah.
Save the Waves, we work with surfers a lot.
Right.
And so Jimmy Panetta, a smart man, he wants to hear, hey, what's important to you surfers right now with the changing environment?
Yeah.
And so he's going to hear from the Santa Cruz Longboard Union, I'll be there for the World Surfing
Right
Reserve.
on.
And he wants to hear from the local community, which I really respect for
Totally.
politicians. A lot of the time politics can start from the top down,
No doubt.
but what we want to do here in Santa Cruz and what we work on at Save the Waves is starting from the grass up.
Yeah, and I think for me, from a standpoint, because I get that and I respect that part, because from me, because I can speak more off the cuff, is I think I'd be interested in the call you out today, and would like to been a fly in the wall. And the other one is because what we're talking about is politics are politics, but sometimes regulations. The ocean's non-political.
Mhm.
The ocean's completely non-political,
I like that.
right? It's non-political. It's an ecosystem, and but then you sometimes have the world of capitalism that kind of gets in. So you reduce regulation that allows the doors possibly for some offshore oil drilling and things like that, which affect these ecosystems. And so I think the best thing we could probably do from this standpoint is kind of talk more in the terms about people just need to keep their ears open. They need to pay attention. And a lot of times, instead of them being overwhelmed with the scroll left and right on their phone, I was even going through the website last night. I think the website here is approachable. It's broken down into consumable sections, even like
Mhm.
the reserves and stuff. And I want to talk about that, but that might be the best way to limp into it is a subscription here. Get sort of the news from an organic standpoint. Because I do think Save the Waves has done a great job without kind of jumping on and creating a divide between the conversation. It's more of an intention driven, singular focus.
Yeah.
And the one thing I do want to kind of talk about also is these reserves,
Mhm.
they are amazing. And I know there was an ambitious goal at one point of 1,000 by 2030 or 2040. I can't remember the
Yeah.
number. And I think there's 15 or whatever it is now in some nominated. What's the status there? Is it still an ambitious goal, or is some of the work you're doing in Santa Cruz speeding that up?
It is, yeah. So our goal is to save 1,000 surf spots by 2030.
Still there.
It's still there, and so there's 13 world surfing reserves, and so at each one of those surfing reserves, there's a certain amount of surf spots. Like I was going through in Santa Cruz the other day, and I was counting up all the
Yeah.
named surf spots. Can you guess how many there are from Natural Bridges to Capitola?
A natural bridge. Born and raised. Let me take my guess. I don't want this is bad air right now, but natural bridges to Capitola. Um, is there 14?
39.
There's no way.
Yep.
Well, and some of them, the one about, and this is one to talk about. You already mentioned one. Its Beach is one. You're born and raised here. Now, that's one that might be at the center of this conversation. That might be a spot that's not going to be here very soon, or is it even there anymore?
Sorry, what spot was that you're
It.
saying? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's like an extreme
Oh,
example right
same.
now is
Yeah.
like, there's overlapping of waves onto the sidewalk on any swell over like 5 foot with a
Exactly.
3 foot tide right now.
Yeah.
And it's usually the spot, where locals would go and they would just hang on the beach right there. And now you can't even hang on the beach. It used to be a surf spot where Nathan Fletcher, Nat Young, all my friends, the
100%.
footers in town, they
There's
love that wave and now it doesn't even break.
It doesn't, and that's the one I think you as a kid, me as a kid, that's a fundamental right. Like you're sitting there on the beach. I'm much older than you, but if I'm sitting there, I went to school right there. What's now Gateway used to be called Morello. We'd go, but if you would have told me in 1988 that this would no longer be, I would just said you're a fucking liar. There's
Yeah.
no way that that's going away, but they are. Some of these spots are, and they need to be curated. So that's the thing I missed then, because I looked at it, I'm like, there's no way they're getting to 1,000, but it's not that the reserves house a lot of different spots. So what is the number right now? 1,000 by 2030. Do you know the number ballpark? If you say
I
all of them?
I think we're in the 400s somewhere.
Amazing.
Yeah, which is, getting close to like halfway, which is pretty
That's
awesome.
incredible.
Yeah, with about, 5 years to go, which is pretty cool. But that's a really interesting fact that you're talking about with its is like now there's 38 waves in the World Surfing Reserve here in Santa Cruz. Like I counted its as a surf spot still, and it's like, yeah, there's kind of that fine line of like how do you determine that it's actually not a surf spot anymore? But
We
I've
know. We
surfers do know, locals know.
Yeah, I'm way past that, but I think the thing about that is, and here's the thing: is if you're here for, and this is where it gets the other part of Save the Waves is, it's a death in the family, and I'm talking about that spot, that wave.
Mhm.
It's like my dad passes away 3 years ago. He's never going to be here again, and that's kind of where we're getting with some of these spots. But then there's the socioeconomic side of it. Because here's a huge part of Santa Cruz. Is I think this goes back. I'm really reaching right now on one I saw, but one of those, that original wave that he saved, I think even the president of the country came in and said, surfers are just kind of losers coming in. They don't spend anything.
Yep.
That's not the case. That is
Yeah.
not the case. The surf spot, go up and down California. It's the kind of let the launch pad for the entire economic scene.
Mhm.
So you start losing these beaches, you start losing these surf spots. It's going to directly affect the economies.
Totally. And that we're working on a really fun study right now in Santa Cruz all about how much surfing revenue is driven in the city of Santa Cruz. So directly, whether that's, buying surfboards and wax at surf shops or
Totally.
indirectly, people staying at motels and hotels for surfing here. And so, in a couple months, we're going to come up with a number of annually how much money is generated
I love
in the
it.
city of Santa Cruz. And so I'm excited to have that number. I'm curious if you have an idea of how much it is.
Here we go. So I'm gonna double my
In my
seasons. But man, this is a tough one for me. So I'm trying to do my math here with the boardwalk numbers I know. Um, it's man, because it's really got these tentacles. It reaches out. 700 million. What is it?
Well, we don't know, but now we have your number on
But
record.
what's your number? What do you get? Well, you have some insight. But what are you guessing? What are you
Yeah.
thinking?
I mean, it's got to be in the, 100 million maybe. I don't know.
Well, if it's Price is Right rules, I'm over. So you can just do. You should do $1.
Yeah.
As if you do the price right, that means you can bet $1 and anything up to 700 million, you win. But no, and I think that actually kind of makes the point though, is that, and I love that idea because if you can't get them emotionally, sometimes you still need to get people to the cause and you can connect them financially because now you're talking about what does this mean? And if it doesn't ring the bell that this is our pristine ecosystem, maybe it'll ring the bell eventually if that's going to affect the value of their house.
Yeah. And like how, surfers say, only a surfer knows the feeling. You've heard that one before where if you're a surfer and you're in the water, like surfing is priceless.
Yeah.
And what's kind of sad sometimes, but true, a lot of like policy and politics, they just want numbers. They may not be a surfer and they might not know that feeling of being a surfer and being in the ocean,
Right.
but they know what $100 million is. And
That's
and
exactly.
they will make those policies based on numbers.
Yeah.
And if you go to them and say, hey, hey, City of Santa Cruz, surfing is bringing you $100 million a year. Can we just use 50,000 of that to protect our surf spots towards like making sure the access is safe for people to get in and out of the water. East Cliff, every time there's been people rescued on cranes getting out at 30th because they can't get out of 30th Avenue right now. All the boulders are right there. There's people that, rent equipment, but they're not too knowledgeable at the ocean. Paddle out, there's a high tide, they can't get in. I was just over there a couple weeks ago, and the city's spending all tax dollars money having to have the fire equipment go out with a crane, pick those people up. Luckily, they're okay, but
Yeah,
it's just like those like scenarios that you don't want. And so like that's why you can go to the city and you go to your county and be like,
totally.
hey, just help us out a little bit because surfing's bringing you guys a lot
Yeah.
of money.
And you're gonna miss some ones too, and, like, I'd be happy to kinda have this conversation because I can tell you even at Vibes, I've got a number of our gross revenue at Vibes. I'm telling you right now, I know the number. 18% of our gross revenue is because of surfing culture,
Hmm.
because we bogart that culture to basically sell the magazine. And so it's not a direct line. We're not selling boards.
Hmm.
We're not selling it, but I would guarantee you that we don't have the presence we have internationally because of the name of our Santa Cruz Vibes magazine and the fact that we have 18%, 20% of our content since day one's been surfing. Then you have to translate. We're popular and we're doing our thing. Surfing's a huge part of our revenue stream
Definitely.
and kind of inflating it. So that's good.
I love that. And I love what you're saying about how, how can people like get engaged and how they read it organically.
Yeah.
What bugs me so much these days is when someone comes up to me like, "Oh, I saw this one thing or I heard this one thing," and it's just like, it was just a meme or it was just like an Instagram like
It's
caption or
exactly it.
something like that. And it's
It's
like
exa-
I just want to tell those people is like, like go like read an article in a magazine or go like read the actual like news outlet organically on the website. Don't just read some Instagram article and then base your decision on that.
it's
It's like
exactly it.
so that's what I love about like having magazines here in Santa Cruz that people can read those articles, know what's going on in Santa Cruz, and it's not just some Instagram caption or ad. It's something that's an organic, article that they take their time to read and become educated about that
So
topic.
spot on. And that's exactly what, and you and I talked about this before, and that's exactly the mission of the print magazines here. And there's a few good ones. Edible does a great job. Everybody does a good job as far as, that print. The coffee table one, what it does is it puts this mission statement right next to, say, a California closet. It's a brand. You don't think of yourself as that when you're doing a nonprofit, you're grinding, you're trying to tell a story. But the reality of it is to get people attracted, you have to attract them to the brand and something you have to do that long-term brand implementation. And that's it. What we're trying to do there with the articles, and also with the newsletter inclusions is just kind of make it more of that drumbeat, we call it, the drumbeat of a message. It could be Barrios Unidos. It could be Save the Waves. It could be Black Surf Santa, because there's so many ones. And for us, it's just there's a constant kind of reminder of that message.
Hmm.
Eventually, I think it starts to become part of that. We call it like the ether, the ether of we care and we want to be engaged. Um, and that's kind of where we land. Is there anything else? We're wrapping this up because we want to keep it in YouTube short. Is there any other major agenda items? Anything's coming up? Like this is the kind of like the late night talk show. What are you here to hype?
It's no, yeah, I mean, that project that we're working on for the Surfonomics of Santa Cruz is really exciting. We should be finishing that at the end of May
Right on.
this year. So we'll have that number. Is it 700 million or is it over or under? But that's really exciting. And then, yeah, as we were talking, I was remembering kind of that first article that Save the Waves had in the first issue
What was it?
of Santa Cruz Vibes. Is I was kind of writing about the Santa Cruz World Surfing Reserve, but kind of coming from my point of view and how I was kind of saying like, how do you give back? But I mean, my take on it all is being present, and it's like live every day to give back. So after every surf, I'll just pick up a piece of trash and
Amazing, dude. Yeah.
because, you can look at the future and it gets daunting sometimes. Like Ethan was saying, maybe it is too late to go back, but if you're just helping out just a little bit every now and then,
Yeah.
that's all we can do. And,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
And he's right. That's it. And it's I've got to show you the clip of it because it's the weirdest, like it's the grimmest news, but it's Ethan. So he's smiling when he's saying this horrible news because Ethan. But the reality of it is it was a massive call to action.
Yeah.
It's he's great at that because he's so humble, but the way he presented it and then saying at the very least, if not for this planet right now, if not for our shit, for my kid. And now he's got two, but it's like, and so he's in that game. But no, and I think that is the essence of what we're doing is kind of creating a space there. And as we wrap this up, this is the fun part of these vibes drop-ins. It comes with some goodies. And the goodies, we have our permanent seat relationship. But what we're going to do for Save the Waves over the next 4 issues, starting in the summers, we're going to give you 4 dedicated full page ads for whatever you want.
Wow.
And so on top of our stuff we normally do, you guys get 4 full page ad placements. And then over the rest of this year, we're going to give you 10 drive time radio spots on KRML radio or ML radio. And that's been really good for some of the people that have used it for, it's kind of more of an urgency or a call to action.
Yeah.
So if you have an event or something like that, those are really good to do morning, evening drive time, blast them for 5 days, and it kind of gets the word out
Yeah.
because their signal now goes all the way to Davenport, and so they're all the way through Santa Cruz. And then on the side tip, we're giving you 4 passes to the boardwalk for you to do whatever you want with it, which is
Wow.
around here.
Okay.
But we're so stoked to be partnered with you, dude. And this was great, and I think this will be one of many we'll do. Maybe get some of the other team members in here,
Yeah.
and we could do another drop in, especially when there's updates or things that are significant to talk about.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
I love partnering with you, dude.
Yeah. Once we get that study out with Surfonomics, that's going to be an exciting one. We have a coalition summit coming up in October at the Dream.
Right on. Okay.
That's where we get all of our global leaders in conservation here in Santa Cruz for a few days.
Oh, get me in on that.
So it'd be awesome to have
Yeah.
vibes there and
Yeah.
kind of maybe track it and get some
100%.
articles out of that would be awesome. And yeah, we have a lot more going on. So thank you for
But what
helping us out.
literally whatever you guys ever need.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Brian.
All right, brother. Thank you. Out.
Thanks, Kyle.
Hey guys. That was a good conversation.
Yeah.
That was good.